All right. Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Tuesday, September 3rd, and we continue to watch the agonizingly slow crawl of Major Hurricane Dorian as it does move away from the Bahamas at a snail's pace, and it will be moving up the Florida coastline and eventually turning paralleling the Carolina coastline and moving out to sea by the end of the week, but is going to be a long, brutal week of tracking and crawling and moving as the storm is refusing to behave and continues to just sit over the Bahamas. And the devastation here continues to just be unbelievable. And the images we're going to see in the coming days of what has happened on these islands as the satellite shifts on me, especially the Grand Bahama Island where Dorian has been parked for more than 24 hours now as a major hurricane will be unbelievable. The flooding, the devastation, it's just I can't fathom what has happened down there. This is truly historically completely unprecedented. But anyway, we do have Dorian here this morning. Satellite presentation, a bit eroded, but still a major hurricane with a very powerful core. You can see the northern half of the storm is kind of being kind of grazed off a little bit by some upper level shear. It's more like this, but overall the idea is that the air is much more stable in this region, and you can see the canopy is being tugged at more of a northeast direction, and the storm is kind of sort of going to be coaxed in that direction here soon. You can kind of see the upper level winds are beginning to cut off the northern tops. That's because of the upper level trough that's digging through the area that's about to pick Dorian up. So we do expect a forward motion to begin here soon, but you can see that eye is become completely cloud filled. And that's because the storm is continuing to feel the effects of the upwelling as the water in around the storm is just become very cold that it's trying to pull up because it's pulled up all the warm water in this area because it sat too long. So we are noticing a weakening trend, but although as Dorian does begin to move north, it's going to find some warmer continental shelf waters, and it will the intensity come down will begin to kind of level off, and it'll be much more of a gradual drop as it does move north. So let's look at the current other satellite here. We got the water vapor imagery up, and we do have in the upper levels this strong trough is digging down, and it's pulling the storm up. So this dig will begin to pull Dorian northward and then eventually northeastward through the forecast period. However, although as Dorian does begin to get pulled north and east, high pressure is beginning to rebuild here across the Atlantic as it's been kind of suppressed for a day or two. That break in the high pressure is what Dorian is following right now. But in later on in the forecast, this high should be building a bit stronger, and Dorian will come dangerously close to the Carolina coastline, potentially still landfalling in parts of eastern North Carolina before it does move out to sea as a Category 1 or 2 hurricane. So we do have a little bit more to track here this morning. Let's go to the latest from the National Hurricane Center. This is the 8 a.m. advisory, their 3-day cone, and we can see here now it looks like Florida will be spared the worst of the storm. I still had a lot of concerns last night, but seeing that Dorian has not moved today and we haven't had any surprises today, although the storm is an intense hurricane and the core of those winds will go up very fast, I just see at this point very few ways that we get Dorian close enough to the coast for those real high end tropical storm like 65 to 75-mile-an-hour winds and in a hurricane condition. Although a hurricane warning remains in effect for most of the Florida coast from areas just south of Jacksonville all the way down to West Palm Beach. At this point in time, I just really don't see a way that this hurricane force conditions are going to get to the coast. So we're looking for a middle of the road tropical storm as far as the conditions are concerned for the east coast of Florida for the most part. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. But you can see how the Hurricane Center does bend the track away from the Georgia coastline, where the only major threat is going to be storm surge. I don't think the winds or anything get anywhere near that hurricane condition in Georgia, and then parts of South Carolina, who are some of that hurricane watch, including Charleston. I think this is about your point where you could see the more serious conditions is about midway through South Carolina northward. But I think that a tropical storm is very likely from most interest along the coastline here, and this part of North Carolina could still be under the gun for a high-end tropical storm to hurricane conditions if Dorian does pass close enough. And that's according to the National Hurricane Center's track here, just seeing what they have put up. Again, those watches and warnings still in effect. And let's look at the the forecast grid office here. This is for Jacksonville, Florida, in terms of what we're expecting now for those actual conditions. And as this thing does pass, the timing for the north half of Florida is during the day on Wednesday, where we can see here that we mostly are looking at 50s and 60s along the coastline. Daytona Beach and the southern counties, like this little slice of like St. Augustine and southward, could still be in the upper 50s to low 60s, which is less than what we had with Hurricane Irma or Hurricane Matthew, but still a formidable tropical storm, and any storm that passes on this side of the state will bring big surge and big erosion and rip currents to the coastline, big waves. So still going to be a pounding for the coastline as any tropical system typically would be. But even if you go a little bit inland, we're looking at the higher wind gusts being in the 40s and 50s, I would say, at the most. And then getting into the inland counties, you're talking about a low grade tropical storm. Even in the gusts, and the winds are probably going to be sustained around that 20, 30 mile an hour mark. So overall, not going to be too bad. That power outages west of the inland counties or the coastal counties will be very sporadic. And then I think that on the coastline, you'll see some scattered power outages and numerous at the beach. But overall, this does look like a bullet dodged for Florida. Kind of the same story here as we go down to the Melbourne forecast office. Again, that the highest winds are going to occur. You're going to see them right here, just north and south of Cape Canaveral, Daytona Beach, and Melbourne, kind of being the edges of those worst effects. This is where the land sticks out more, and you can see some wind gusts around 70 miles an hour. I think at the peak, if the storm were to wobble any further west, these winds do go up a little bit. But I think at this point, these wobbles are very minor, and the storm is pretty much going to be too far offshore for any hurricane force impacts. And I think that even that high echelon tropical storm impacts, 74 miles an hour or so, are very unlikely to occur at this point. I think around the upper 60s to very low 70s is it, and it'll be at Cape Canaveral if it's anywhere. So overall, looking pretty good for Florida. We are expecting still some significant rainfall in the 4 to 6 inch range, of some isolated areas of the beach getting upwards of 8. The grids have actually increased the rainfall forecast slightly, which is curious. But overall, right at the coastline here, those 8 inch pluses, and then 4 to 6 elsewhere. So it will be a rainy event, and will be some minor street flooding, coastal flooding. But again, overall, not too terrible. Let's go ahead though and bring in the other tab here. We do have a little bit more of a look for North Carolina and whatnot. This is kind of going to be the timing of this whole event as well. So we do have the system by this afternoon. We'll be beginning to pull away from the Bahamas, but although you see the latitude gain from today until like 5 p.m. still won't be a whole lot. But as we go into about 5 a.m. on Wednesday, we see the storm has moved up considerably, and the forward speed has increased significantly. And we'll be seeing those tropical storm conditions occurring through parts of South Central Florida and the Cape about this time. And if the strongest winds are going to occur, it's going to be early Wednesday morning along the Cape here. And then we get into Wednesday about lunchtime. We have the storm passing through Jacksonville by 4 o'clock. So anywhere from late Wednesday morning to late Wednesday afternoon is going to be the Northeast Florida's kind of worst conditions. Not a day to be traveling around, guys. It won't be as bad as we were thinking, but overall, this is not a day to be out and about and doing whatever you're doing. This is a day to just kind of stay home and just hang out. But we go into midnight on Thursday. We see this bend. Now the storm is trying to turn back northeast. But again, the high pressure ridge that's going to be kind of controlling it is going to control how fast that shift is or how slow that shift is. And it'll really give us a good idea of how close this comes. But as we go into about midday on Thursday, we have the storm moving up along the South Carolina coastline where tropical storm conditions are very likely to be occurring. And this is where it kind of gets hairy because we go at about 8 p.m. on Thursday and we see how much closer the system looks like it could be getting. And this close shave, as the Hurricane Center shows it too, could be a big deal for eastern North Carolina. We go into 2 a.m. on Friday, and the system is pushed into North Carolina, where we see Wilmington's getting really strong tropical storm conditions. Myrtle Beach had them a few hours before this, and this is again Friday morning, early Friday morning, like Thursday night after midnight. And by Friday mid morning, we see the storm is accelerated past, so it's going to be a fast mover. This is only going to be a couple hours. It's only going to take about 6 hours to pass, but there could be some serious tropical storm to hurricane force conditions occurring across eastern North Carolina, and a brief landfall somewhere around Havelock or Moorehead City or the Outer Banks. At this point, couldn't be ruled out. It's just going to depend exactly how close the storm gets. But the good news is it will be at a pretty substantial clip, and it won't be the effects will not last very long. But coastal impacts with storm surge and whatnot will be a big deal. And I also wanted to say, I didn't say a minute ago, regardless of how close or far Dorian does wind up coming to Florida's coast, big surge is coming for the Florida coast in terms of 4 to 7 feet. Also for eastern, southeast Georgia, where the winds will be pretty light for you guys, I think, overall, but you will have a decent fetch for some serious storm surge. So if you're at the coast and you left for good reason. There's still storm surge is much less tied to exact storm distance and intensity and is much more tied to how much the fetch is, and the storm is a massive fetch. So uh, the water rise will be significant on the coast, regardless of how close or far this comes. So that's kind of the idea as far as the latest here. This is the weather forecast office for Morehead City in eastern North Carolina, where the conditions could be the worst. And you see here upwards in the 60s and 70s as far as wind gusts are concerned. And I think that if this core was to pass very close, it'll be a Category 2 to 1 hurricane as it passes. So, it doesn't take much to get into those upper tropical storm force range. So, right now, that's just a tropical storm, but you can see those 70s are creeping onto the map. And if Dorian were to inch a bit closer, just like I was talking about with Florida, those wind gusts do go up in a hurry. And the rainfall forecast still expected to be upwards of 6 to 8 inches of rain, with some parts of the Outer Banks getting even higher. So, it won't be a Florence type situation. It'll be a very fast moving storm, but it could produce winds not too far off of what Florence gave you, and the rainfall will be obviously significantly less, but still not a joke and still not something you want to be dealing with. So Friday will be kind of your game day. Thursday will be the game day for parts of South Carolina and Georgia, and Wednesday will be the game day for Northeast Florida, and tonight and tomorrow morning will be the big deal for South Central Florida. Last thing I want to deal with, guys, is the rest of the tropics. There are other interests in the tropics we've been watching. Hurricane Center has several areas of interest on their map, 5 in total right now. We do have potential tropical cyclone 7 that's going to move into parts of Mexico. We do have tropical storm watches up for parts of the Mexican coastline. This does not include Brownsville, Texas, or any interest north, but there will get some rain from it. Overall, not going to be a big deal, but this likely will be a named system making landfall, so it's worth noting. And then elsewhere, we do have some of these high end disturbances. This will become a tropical storm. The area west of the Cabo Verde Islands could and likely is to turn north and get out of the way and not be a problem. And the disturbance near Dorian, although it has a 40% chance of development, also likely to turn away to sea. So none of these areas are going to threaten the United States, except maybe this one that's coming off. This is a wave that's going to be coming off of Africa or has just exited Africa. So that could be an issue to watch. And then looking beyond the 5 day outlook, guys, it does appear that September will stay very busy. This is the peak of hurricane season. September 10th is the statistical peak of the season. And it does appear that some upper atmospheric waves are going to be passing the Atlantic, will make conditions still very favorable for additional storms to develop. So we could have a seriously busy September if everything falls into place. So don't sleep on this. If you're mad that you evacuated for the storm, or you're mad that you bought all these supplies and you didn't use them, well, just stay calm and keep the stuff packed away, because this may not be the last storm we deal with this year, and very well may not be. So just keep an eye out, stay vigilant. I know these things are exhausting and tiresome, but you just got to stay with them and got to respect them and appreciate how lucky we were with Dorian as far as Florida is concerned, and will be regardless, elsewhere, and how much worse this could have been. Because when you see what happened in the Bahamas, it's going to be sobering. So anyway, guys, that's what I got for you today. We'll be back this afternoon tonight. I'll try to drill down that North Carolina forecast a bit more and kind of go from there. And we'll be continuing to watch the rest of the tropics as they pop up. So that's what I got. Thanks for watching and have a good one.